Good evening, friends. Welcome to this free live session brought to you by TalentSprint. So let's look at what we have in line for today's session. So basically, I said I will share with you some tips, right? Now, basically, what's a tip? If you ask me, I'd say the dictionary says it's a helpful advice or a practical suggestion, right? That's what it is. So whatever I am going to share with you in today's session is a practical suggestion, which means it's doable, which means this is something that you can actually go ahead and plan and, come up with a strategy in terms of how to go about approaching the English language itself, be it any exam, right? Not specific to any particular exam. I'm just going to address how to look at the English language section itself in terms of irrespective of whichever exam it is, right? So I'm not going to say how we're going to do it, right? But what we'll do is I'm definitely going to share the tips. I have prepared a small presentation which I'll be sharing with you guys. So I think we'll get started, right? Quite a bit to cover here. So people are coming back and asking specific tips for specific questions, which I've shared a lot earlier in my earlier sessions, right? We've looked at specific question types like jumble sentence or reading comprehension, and I'm sure you've already made use of all those tips. So I'm not going to be repeating things. We're going to look at something different, right? So let me go ahead and share the presentation to start with. Yeah. So first, to go ahead and begin, right, we're just going to kind of look at some questions that we're already familiar with, right? Let's look at some question types that we will normally encounter in the exam. So I'm sure you're familiar with this pattern, right? If you look at the first screen, there are about 4 questions. As soon as you take a look at it, you know it's all finding error questions, right? Okay. When you look at this question type, you know it's a jumble sentence question. Right, another jumble sentence question. And here we have a fill in the blanks, it's a single blank question. And then we have a closed passage. So we're familiar with these question types, right? But what we probably may not be aware of is where do they take all these, question types from, right? All these questions that we have in our exam. Where do they get all the questions from this? So many exams happening, right, simultaneously, sometimes overlapping, or one after the other. So where do they get all these question types from? Where's the source basically from, right? Let's take a look at that. We look at the same questions that we took a look at right now. Now, the first set of questions that we saw, the finding error questions, this is the source, right? For each question, I've put down the source beneath it. So the first one was taken from the Hindu business line, money and banking. The title is HDFC, Solid Foundation. The second one is taken from the Hindu again. The title is Before He Became Mahatma. The third one is taken from Times Group, Times of India, e-paper, Top 10 Dividend Payers. The fourth one is taken from the Fiscal Times, Business Plus Economy. And you see the title there, right? Let's move on. Let's look at our other question types. The 2 jumble sentences that we saw, again, the source is Economic Times blogs. Okay? This one that we saw, single blank. The source is from Reuters, Business News. And the last one that we saw, closed passage, that's also from the Hindu. So what I'm trying to say here is, one of the first suggestions that I'm giving you is for you to read. But at the same time, you need to know what to read, right? We need to read the right stuff. So what happens is, everybody is saying read a lot, make reading a habit. But what to read, especially when it comes to bank exams, right? So there are specific sources which you can rely on, and that's what I'm going to be sharing. So that's your first tip. So I've kind of collated a list of the sources from which you can actually practice reading, right? One, it'll help you with your reading comprehension, reading fluency. We look at that towards the end. But otherwise also, just take a quick look at some of the sources that I've put down. Let me share that. Okay. So like I said, the first tip is read, but know what to read. Now, these are some of the sources that you should probably keep into account or take into account while preparing. Or rather, I would say, just make it a habit in terms of reading, but read the right sources, right? So I've just put down about 10 sources, right? Predominantly, I've reviewed hundreds and hundreds of papers, and the question types predominantly revolve around these sources, but of course, there are other sources as well. But what I'm trying to say is, while you take the time to read, you might as well read the right stuff, right? So, source one, the Hindu business line, or the Hindu itself, front page, Economic Times, blogs, Times of India articles, Times Group e-paper. Then you have the Economic Times again, apart from the blogs. Then you have Reuters, Business News, Financial Times blogs, the Telegraph, which is a Calcutta-based paper, right? The best feature about the Telegraph is every day they have a special feature. Like, for example, on Mondays, you'll have like a know-how article, right? It's actually a 2-page section on science, computers, and health. Then you have the Fiscal Times, Business Plus Economy, and Business Standard editorials. Now, Business Standard editorials are good for passage completion questions. Remember, we were all surprised with this new question pattern, IBPS PO, right? So, Business Standard editorials have a lot of these passages, which, of course, they used as a passage completion question type. So, and then, of course, we have Blogspot, right? So, I think, a lot of us are not aware of where to go get the resources from in terms of how do I make sure that I'm learning right? So these are some of the sources that I've shared with you. Now, before we move to the second tip that I have for you today, it's also good, right? The first one we saw is to read, but to read the right stuff. The second one that we have in place today is to be able to recall. So what I'm trying to say is, you should be able to remember the information that you've either read or heard. Very difficult for some of us unless we are actively listening or actively paying attention to what we are reading, right? So especially when you're taking time to prepare for the exams, it has to be a little bit of focused attention, right? So you don't have to read all of these at once, Ashish. It's over a period of time. These are the sources which you can rely on. You can create your own strategy and plan, right? When there is an exam scheduled, you don't sit and read everything in one day, right? You pace it out. So that's what I'm saying. So we'll cover that towards the end in terms of what plan or strategy we need to keep in mind. But the second thing is to be able to recall what you've read or what you've heard. Now, some concepts that will immediately loom large. Now, be it question types like whether it's fill in the blanks or finding errors or close passage or jumble sentence or sentence improvement, whatever the question type is. Now, there are some prominent concepts which are very, very, I won't say, I can even call it popular, right? Because it's almost there in every other question. Now, the concepts that I'm talking about is collocations and phrasal verbs. Now, let's take a look at a couple of example sentences to figure out why we need to be able to recall information. First one we said, read the right stuff. Second one is recall, remember information read or heard. So let's take a look at a couple of questions. Alright. So again, the pattern that we have in front of us is, as soon as you see it, you know these are finding error questions, right? So let's try and attempt these questions quickly. So question 1, it was apparent for everyone present that if the patient did not receive immediate medical aid, he would die. Question 2, one of the star players in our college football team had the habit to arrive late for practice. Question 3, this has forced them to focus at how to reach and serve their customers rather than, say, pumping money into fancy graphics that look good in management meetings. Now, what I'm trying to say is, apparent means obvious or very evident, right? That's the meaning of apparent. So, if that is the case, now having read these statements in front of us, you're able to kind of recall in terms of like this, right? Keywords, and try and see what will that keyword normally associate itself with. Do you see the preposition after apparent? For. So can you quickly recollect, usually when I have apparent, which is an adjective, right? What preposition does it usually associate itself with? Can somebody quickly tell me? So obviously, what are these? I'm talking about collocations, right? So this is an adjective plus preposition collocation, apparent to. That's the right collocation, right? So it is very obvious to someone about something. Something is very obvious to someone. Something is very evident to someone. So that's the right collocation. What about, so obviously the error is in part A here. What about the next one? Some of them saying one of the star player, but we all know that, when a sentence starts with one of the, which means we are saying out of so many people, one person, right? So star players as a noun number, plural noun number is absolutely fine there. But where else do you think the error is in the second one? One of the star players in our college football team had the habit to arrive late for practice. So we're talking about somebody who has the habit. And what is his habit? He's always late. So when you're referring to someone having the habit, what's the right colloquial phrase? Right? So example, if I say, hey, I can't get up early, right? I have the habit of getting up late, or I have the habit of biting my nails. So usually when somebody has the habit, so is this the right preposition after habit? Yes, habit of arriving late. So what are these? This is a noun plus preposition collocation again. Habit of arriving late. So obviously the error is in part B. What about the next one? This has forced them to focus at how to reach and service their customers rather than blah blah blah. Where do you think the error is? Focus on. So you look at the keyword, right? Verb plus, I need the right preposition. You always focus on something, right? The error is in part A. So you see, what are all these? These are nothing but collocations. So if you are able to kind of recall or remember, that usually when people speak or when you read something, these are pretty much the words that get associated with apparent to, habit of doing something. You focus on something, right? So these are all collocations. When you're familiar with collocations, which means when you are looking at the sentence, you should have the ability to be able to spot those. And that comes only when either you try and recollect information that you've already read. This is something that you already know, right? This is not something new. So you're looking at the statement, and if you're not able to spot that immediately, which means either you've forgotten what you've read or heard, because these are not difficult collocations, right? So are you following? Let's look at a couple of more. Okay, this one is a single blank. Anuradha has a dash interest in classical music. The options are wide, keen, high, bright, pleasant. Again, I want you to apply the concept of collocation in this one. And even the second one. The second one is a double blank. In 2009, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's government dash on its election promise to set up an international crime tribunal to try those dash of genocide during the 1971 war. So basically, what you're paying, I'll give you a clue, right? This obviously is a adjective, because all my options are adjectives, and then I have interest, which is a noun, right? You're paying attention to the words around. So obviously most of you got that right. Keen interest, that's a collocation. Adjective plus noun collocation, right? The second one, any guesses for the second one, right? Pay attention to the prepositions next to the blanks, on and off. If you notice the second option, right, most of it go with off. You can be suspicious of someone, you can be suspicious of something. Suspected of doesn't sit right. Uncertain, you can be uncertain about something, right? Or even uncertain of, very rarely. Imagined of doesn't make sense. Suspected of also is correct. He was suspected of doing something, right? Imagined of doesn't sit right. You can be doubtful of someone or something. So the second blank, A, B, and E go, right? C and D not very likely. What about the first blank? Conveyed, delivered, expressed, forwarded, deposited. Apart from the collocations, we're also paying attention to clue words in the context, like Ajay points out, right? Promise. So when you say delivered on, right? That's your promise is your clue word. So when you say you're delivering on something, which means you promised someone something and you're taking action on it, on that, right? You're delivering on that promise. So obviously the answer here is not A, because conveyed on is not giving us the right expression, completing the meaning of the context, but B. So here again we've applied a little bit of collocations, right? Verb plus preposition collocations and suspected of. There you go. right? Most of you came back and said A, but for A, the first blank is not an appropriate word, and your clue word being promise. So here again, we've applied a little bit of collocation. So whether it is finding errors or fill in the blanks, and collocations is another concept which is very much applied in closed passage as well, right? Closed passage again, it's all about context, it's all about filling up the blanks. Yeah? So collocations is one. Another one that we need to kind of quickly focus on is, right, to be able to recall information is, let's see what that is. Let's look at our questions. If you are not clear about the meaning of a word, it is wise to look to a dictionary. And the highlighted phrase is look to, and I have options. Look for, look at, look up, and then of course no improvement. So when the highlighted phrase, what is it? Can somebody tell me what the concept is? I know look is a verb, obviously, and to is a preposition. So what are these? So I'm getting various responses for this one. I have A, B, C, phrasal verbs. So phrasal verbs are basically verb plus preposition or verb plus adverb collocations, right? And what you need to understand is one phrasal verb can have different meanings in different contexts. That's also something that you need to keep in mind. Now here, what are they trying to do here? Look for means you're searching. Look at, again, that's just typically just seeing something. Look up. What's the meaning of look up? Basically, look up as a phrasal verb means to consult either a reference book or in this case a dictionary. It can be any book, right? Basically a reference book or a dictionary for a specific piece of information. So in the context, the most appropriate phrasal verb that will fit would be option C. Right? Look up, consult. So if you're not clear about the meaning of a word, it is wise to look up a dictionary, meaning go and refer to it for that specific piece of information. See, so the idea behind phrasal verbs is to not just understand that, yes, this is a concept that will help me with either sentence improvement or even finding errors or fill in the blanks, but to also understand that each phrasal verb have different meanings in different contexts. Let's look at the finding error questions. Amit, there's no need for you to get confused at all. See, if you're not clear about the meaning of a word, it is wise to look at a dictionary. If you're going to just look at a dictionary, it's not going to help you and it's not logically completing the meaning. So option B can be ruled out. Look for a dictionary means go search for a dictionary. Again, that's not going to really serve the purpose. The only closest phrasal verb is look up, which means you're going to consult the dictionary, which means you're going to open it, go through it, and look for that specific piece of information that you're looking at. Are you following? Right? Look up means, another way to say it is to refer to something. Right? You're consulting something to refer to whatever it is that you're searching for or looking for specifically. So let's move on to the next one. Rahul turns up a consistent performance every day. So where do you think the error is, or do you think there is any error at all? So what's the meaning of turns up actually? So if I take turns up, again, obviously this is a verb, right? Plus up is a adverb. So this is a verb plus adverb collocation. It's a phrasal verb. So turns up actually means what? You know, we were waiting for a friend to join us for the party and then he didn't turn up, which means he didn't come at all, right? That's one meaning. To arrive, he didn't arrive. That's one meaning, turns up, right? This person didn't turn up, or he turned up on time, which means he arrived on time, right? Turns up can also have a simple meaning like, hey, can you turn up the volume, right? Increasing the speed or volume of something. So is this the right phrasal verb in the context? Not really, right? What is the context? What meaning is the context giving? Most of you are coming back and saying no error, but we've already established the fact that turns up is an incorrect phrasal verb. The context is telling me this person, right, is exhibiting consistent performance, or the result of his work is consistent, which means I need a phrasal verb that brings out that meaning. What can that phrasal verb be? Somebody actually gave out the meaning earlier, turns in. So when you use turns in, which means what? To produce or to hand in or to deliver, right? And that's the right phrasal verb in the context. Rahul turns in, which means he delivers, he produces a consistent performance every day. He hands in a consistent performance every day. Turns in is the right phrasal verb to replace turns up. So do you see how turns up we saw had two different meanings? Turns in has this meaning, right? To produce, to hand in, to deliver. So it's important for us to be familiar with as many phrasal verbs as possible and understand the different meanings these phrasal verbs bring in different contexts. When you say turns into, which means changes, right? That's another phrasal verb altogether. Somebody turns into something means he's changing. So depending on the meaning, what meaning does that phrasal verb have? Let's move to the next one. I was really put aside by the way he eats with his mouth open. The obvious, can somebody quickly point out the phrasal verb here in the next context? This person is actually not qualified for the post. I'm just giving a random example, which means what? It turns out, so as a result, what happened was the final outcome, right? That's the meaning. So put aside is the obvious phrasal verb. But is that the right phrasal verb in the context? I was really put aside by the way he eats with his mouth open. Put aside means what? Again, put is the verb, aside is the adverb, is the verb plus adverb phrasal verb. Okay. So what does it mean? When I say I'm putting aside something, means what? If I say we put aside the idea, let me give you an example sentence. If I say we put aside the idea until the next meeting, right? What am I saying here? Put aside the idea until the next meeting, which means what? I'm saving it for another day, another time, postpone, yes, right? It can also mean, you're reserving something for someone to collect later. So different meanings in different contexts again. So in the context, what do we need? In the context, it says that this person did not like the way he or she ate, probably, right? And was disgusted with their eating mannerism. So what do? What is the right phrasal verb here? Obviously, the error is in part B. What do you change put aside to? Put off. A couple of other people also had mentioned it earlier. Put off, right? I was really put off. When you're put off with something, which means you really don't like it. You have an aversion towards it. To stop liking something or someone. In this context, this person doesn't like. Keep aside is another phrasal verb again, right? To keep aside means to set apart for later or for the future. See, the best way to learn phrasal verbs is in a context, because phrasal verbs have different meanings in different contexts, right? So if you take, for example, if I take put off, again, we'll take put aside, put off, put away, put in, right? There are all these different phrasal verbs with put. So I need to understand what are the meanings of all these phrasal verbs in different contexts. Are you following? Turns up, so turns in, turn away, turn over, right? There are so many phrasal verbs with turn. So it's important that you figure that out. Okay, so far, we just looked at two quick tips, right? One was, we said, hey, we need to read the right source. Two was, we said, we should be able to recall information that we already know. We just have to remember. It could be phrasal verbs, it could be collocations, it could be certain rules that you've read when it comes to, finding errors, right? Certain rules that you would have read. If the sentence starts with one of the, it has to follow a plural noun number, right? Or subject-verb agreement rules, right? Things like that. So, the idea is for us to be able to recollect it at the time of the examination, right? Now, the third tip I want to leave with you is to be able to resolve, right? We said read, we said recall. The third one is to resolve. When I say resolve, I'm referring to you making a firm decision to figure out a way to help with your challenging question types, whatever it is, right? For some of us, it is reading comprehension. For some of us, it's finding errors. For some of us, it's jumbled sentences. For some of us, it is close passage. Whatever your challenging question type is, you need to figure out a way to address that, right? That is your challenge. So you need to have a plan, make time or allot time on a daily basis and stick to the plan. Yeah. So what do I need to focus on for all of these or some of these challenging question types, right? Let's take a quick look at it. and then we'll come back and then I'll probably take some questions from you guys. Right? So the third one is to resolve. So what can we do regarding certain question types? One, reading comprehension. The only thing that you need to do is work on your reading fluency, right? Because when you're preparing, strategizing specifically for exam purposes, one, you need to be able to read fast. Two, you need to be able to understand what you're reading. So you only need to work on your speed and comprehension, right? And that will come only when you read. And I've already shared with you the sources that you can jump into in terms of reading. Finding errors, get your basics right. Grammar, that's about it, right? Whether it is subject to verb agreement rules, pronoun rules, phrasal verbs, again, have an understanding of phrasal verbs, have an understanding of infinitives, gerunds, when to use, when to change, what is the usage of these, right? So get your basics right. Fill in the blanks. So when I say, before we move on to fill in the blanks, finding errors, know and get familiar with as many error types as possible, right? I've kind of collated about close to 21, 23 error types in our database, right? All the TalentSprinters have access to it. However, what I'm trying to say is, try and get familiar with as many error types as possible, and that will come only when you take so many questions, right? The more questions you practice, the more error types you will get familiar with. So you should be able to identify the error when you spot it. Okay? Fill in the blanks. Fill in the blanks, you need to brush up your concepts. We just saw two concepts, collocations, phrasal verbs, right? Context clues. That's another one which we will apply when it comes to fill in the blanks, closed passage, whatever it is. You need to know what these are. Some of you are not even aware that there is something called phrasal verbs, right? Which is startling. So you need to kind of make a note of that. Vocabulary. When it comes to synonyms and antonym questions, one word substitutions, I keep saying this, right? Either you know the answer or you don't know the answer, but we can still apply concepts like root words. So get familiar with meanings of common root words, right? Some of which I've shared earlier in some other classes. Prefixes and suffixes. So as long as you are familiar with meanings of these common root words, prefixes and suffixes, I think you're good to go. So have a study plan, right? Allot some time daily and stick to it. Be determined. Now when it comes to root words, there is no easy way to learn it, right? There are a couple of ways in which you can learn it. One again is to engage yourself in a lot of vocabulary games, I would say. That kind of helps in, registering words, right? When I personally have experienced that, I don't know if anybody agrees with it or not. Engage yourself in a lot of vocabulary games especially which stresses on repetition, right? It kind of brings back to you words that you haven't scored well with. So it keeps bringing those words back again until you register the meaning of it. So that's one way to do it, right? Second thing is to go ahead and again look at and apply concepts around it. So when I learn a new word, I need to also understand what form it is in, right? What are the different forms in each form? For example, if I take determine, right? The noun form is determination, the adjective form is determined, determinedly, adverb form, right? So how can I apply all these words in different contexts, right? What are the synonyms? What are the antonyms, right? Things like that. So that kind of helps me. Third is root words, right? That's another strategy. I wouldn't say it's a complicated strategy, but it involves a lot of effort, right? Because it's not a joke to remember all the root words, but you can at least focus on what are the common ones, right? I've taken a session earlier as well on root words. Maybe you can check that up on YouTube. Close test, Gagan. For close test, I always say this, it's just a, bigger version of a fill in the blanks context, right? Close test is all about context. 10 blanks. Look for repeat words in the context, right? Sometimes the answer for one blank might be available for you in the next sentence. So always kind of read through the context, and especially for close test, it's all about the context, right? So figure out what the main essence or theme of the passage is. That will help you identify associated words, right? If the theme is about time management, so words associated to that. Or if the theme is about health care, words associated to that. Or if the theme is about finance, words associated to that. Economy. Are you following? So get the theme. For that you need to do a quick skim, read through, understand what the theme is. Then you'll be able to identify associated words. The third strategy that you can apply for closed passages to focus on words in and around the blank, right? Like we said, collocations is a concept that you will definitely be applying in closed passage. This word has to go with this word. Why? Because this is the usage. This is the right construction. 3. That's the third strategy for closed passage. So it's almost the same strategy that you will apply for fill in the blanks. Look for clue words in the context. There'll be some highlighting keywords. Identify that. How do I identify keywords? Ask questions. What, where, why, how. You will identify the keywords, then see what are this word has to go with this. Apply collocations. But if you come to the end of the session, I'm going to take leave now. But thank you so much for participating. Thanks for watching. And hopefully this was an effective session for you. Do let us know if you are looking at something specific to be taken. We will try and incorporate that in the future sessions. Right? And have a good evening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Welcome to TalentSprint. For each and every one of you who are preparing for bank and SSC examination, the knowledge on current affairs is extremely important. Let's see what are the important news of this week. The Union government has invited public comments on the report for the creation of Financial Redressal Agency.
Let us now understand the various types of propositions or statements used in syllogisms. Generally, there are 4 types of statements that are given in syllogisms, and they are as shown here. The first statement here is all A's are B's. That means all A's or every A is B. The second one is no A is B, or we can say none of the A is B. The third statement is some A's are B's, or we can also say a few A's are B's. The fourth statement here is some A's are not B's.